Hello and welcome to episode 77 of the Heart of Markness podcast. Tonight's topic is... I went back to 1969 for this one, although I was sorely tempted by September 3rd, 1971. In the Discord that I'm in, the youths were discussing, underrated shows, and they we're talking about how criminally underrated 9371 is, and I agreed with them. So I downloaded it and I was going to do it, but then I realized I've done quite a few 1971 shows, and what would it be? Heartbreaker, Communication Breakdown, Whole Lotta Love, Always, and I wanted to jump back a little because there's been some calls for 75 shows. There's been some calls for 77 shows, and I will do them. I will swing the pendulum back that way again. But I needed some hungry young Zeppelin, and especially after the passing of Eddie Van Halen, holy smokes. That came out of the blue. I mean, somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew he had had cancer for years. I didn't realize it was in his lungs. And not being a Van Halen fan, I hadn't been keeping abreast of it, so it was just like, on Twitter, it's like, la, 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 la. What? Hence the rambling Eddie Van Halen tribute I did last night, because even as a non-fan, they still impacted my life. He still impacted my life. It's the soundtrack of my teenage years. And many of you, too, since my demographic is pretty much peer related. Some of you are older, some of you are younger. Most of you seem to be about my age. The age of the Trans Am, of the Firebird, of the Camaro. Driving around, cranking tunes on the cassette player. And, driving around cruising, looking for something to do. So, if you haven't heard the Van Halen thing I did last night, there's some great tracks that I played from a 1978 set of their first tour of England, where they were opening for Black Sabbath, and much like Led Zeppelin, they smoked and destroyed the main act. They blew Sabbath off the stage, and which leads us into segue Led Zeppelin's second U.S. tour, of which this show, which is April 26th, 1969, San Francisco at the Winterland, and Bill Graham's Winterland. And I've covered the 27th long time ago. And the 26th, just the night before, is unbelievable. Louis Ray, who is the archivist of Zeppelin tapes, and he writes the Led Zeppelin tape books that I rely on. I have my old paperback copy from, 30 years ago. That's dog-eared, and the cover's peeling off. And I have the 4th edition as well, which is the newer edition. And he pretty much nails it. On this second U.S. tour, I mean, this is April. Led Zeppelin first started touring, for all intents and purposes, in the States in January of 69. Yes, they played New Year's Eve and they played December 30th, but let's just fold it in for the sake of argument and for the elegance of the comparison. Say they started in January as an unknown opening act whose only draw is that it was a band with the last guitarist that the Yardbirds had. And they went from opening for Iron Butterfly, Vanilla Fudge, The Doors, etc., and blowing them off the stage, much like Van Halen would do 10 years later, to, in a mere 4 months, headlining, and often with no opening act, already, just in that 3 months, from a brand new, never heard of these guys, holy shit, I went to go see Vanilla Fudge, and this opening act was fucking crazy. I think they were called the Led Zeppelin. And boom, Zeppelin 1's released. They're relentlessly touring, and word of mouth became word of ear as they were played on the radio, became instant fan base, just like you could hear on the Van Halen thing last night, where they come out and David Lee Roth is like, hey there, this is our first tour of England. You don't know us. We are Van Halen. And then they win the crowd over because they're playing Ain't Talking About Love and Running with the Devil and all this stuff perfectly. And the crowd is eating it up. And in his own way, David Lee Roth was a master of the crowd. Not on the same wavelength as Robert Plant, but it's a comparable story in as much as coming out of the gates hot and being instant stars. It's not like, oh, by their third album, they had garnered quite a fan base and started to really fill arenas. No, Led Zeppelin, boom. Hey, we're opening for Iron Butterfly. 4 months later, hey, we're playing the same venue as Iron Butterfly, headlining with no opener. Brilliant. This is the beginning of the Les Paul era. Jimmy was transitioning from the Telecaster. My understanding is he got his Les Paul, the 59 Les Paul that he bought from Joe Walsh, then of the James Gang. Either he bought it in April of 69 or he started using it in April of 69. But in any case, this is kind of the zenith of the psychedelic Led Zeppelin, the Led Zeppelin of the 60s, moving into the 70s rapidly, defining the 70s in many ways, in the way that Van Halen in many ways defined the 80s, with the spandex and the neon colors and the jumping around and there's a lot of comparisons there. Aside from the fact that all four members of Zeppelin were virtuosos, and Eddie was brilliant, and the rest of the band were famous and good, really good, but not virtuoso, not of the level of Zeppelin, obviously. All right, I gotta get off of Van Halen because it's a Zeppelin show. One interesting thing about this show, aside from the fact that every track they play at this show is brilliant, there's no duds. Aside from that, it is the first live performance of Whole Lotta Love, or at least the first live performance of Whole Lotta Love of which we are aware. They may have played it at other dates. Doubtful, but possible, because we don't have every Led Zeppelin concert recorded, tragically. But this is its first appearance. And just for that, it's worth hearing. And, all right. Well, I'm trying to not ramble for 15 minutes, as I always do, so I'm going to nip this in the bud. And here is the set list. You will be able to download this for free at heartofmarkness.com, because I got to download it for free. Why shouldn't you? Here is the set list in case you're interested, because I'm obviously not going to play all these songs. There's 2 sets. They open with Communication Breakdown, right into I Can't Quit You, into a very long, especially for the time, Dazed and Confused, with an interesting placement of the theremin. The theremin is at the end of the song. It's very neat. You should hear it. I'm not playing it because it's very long and I don't feel like it. Into You Shook Me. How many more times? Dun, 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 dun. Brilliant White Summer, Black Mountainside. Set 2 opens up with Killing Floor, which morphs into Lemon Song down a few months down the road. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. Pat's Delight, which is what John Bonham's drum solo was called before Moby Dick was created. As Long as I Have You, which is bonkers. And I'm not playing that because I played that song from the 27th, the next night on the podcast when I did that, and I've played one other version of that in another 69 show, and I don't want to. I'm trying to diversify the playlist because you can download these and hear them yourself. So, and then of course the first probably the first ever live performance of Whole Lotta Love, and definitely the first live recording we have of Whole Lotta Love. I am using Dadgad's brilliant remaster, revision 3 of the remaster, and the lineage is first generation tape to VHS to DAT to CD to your ears. Now VHS, if you're like, what the fuck? The reason it's VHS is if you remember back in the 80s, when VHS Hi-Fi came out, there was briefly stereo VHS, which had horrible sound quality because it split the basic mono track, which was already like an eighth of an inch of the tape at the bottom, split it in two and made stereo tracks out of that. So the fidelity was garbage. Shortly thereafter, somewhere in like 1984, maybe, VHS Hi-Fi appeared, where a VHS head. Here, I'm going to waste time because I'm already at 11 minutes, but I want to explain this. The VHS tape head was a giant spinning head that would read the tape diagonally, like at a 45-degree angle. The reason it did that is if you had a tape that was, say, an inch wide, inch and a half wide, I can't remember how long let's say an inch. By having it diagonal, you have the surface area of the recording increased because it's diagonal. So you would have maybe an inch and a half of space to record and have that much more room for information and data. Helical head, I think is what it was called. And what they did for the hi-fi is underneath, on a layer underneath the video, or maybe in a different frequency range, so it didn't affect the video, the sound was recorded, and it had all that surface area on which to occupy. So the fidelity was incredible. It rivaled the best reel-to-reels. I mean, the best consumer, not like the top shelf studio shit, but it was excellent sound quality, and it was not uncommon at all for people to record audio on the VHS Hi-Fi. Because of that, the fidelity was incredible, and it was used for trading and things because it was a very accessible. Almost every home had a VHS, and lots of people had Hi-Fi VHSs, even if they still played them through their shitty TV speakers. So as such, you had a high-fidelity audio component in your house almost by default. So that's why the VHS lineage is in there, and it was very common for tape traders in the 80s to use before the digital audio tape, had its ascendance. All right. Hey, look at that. I wasted 13 and a half minutes. Well, I didn't waste it because I think I imparted some knowledge on you. All right, let's jump in here. We're going to go straight to I Can't Quit You because I feel like some blues tonight. And again, this is the Winterland Ballroom, San Francisco. April 26th, 1969, from the mighty Led Zeppelin. Here we go. That's 7.5 months away from the Royal Albert Hall gig that's on the DVD. And it's just incredible. It's also 4 months after their initial, I think it was January 5th, was the first soundboard recording. We covered that one. They sounded a little tentative back then. No, tentative isn't the right word. A little... The visual image I have is one of those giant cars that in or trucks that's in India or Pakistan, on those mountain passes that are just exactly as wide as the wheelbase of the truck, and there's 7,000 people in the truck and 7,000 people on top of the truck, and the truck's going around this corner, 7,000 feet above this ravine, and it rounds the corner. It goes up on two wheels for a second. That's how Led Zeppelin sounds to me when they came out in January. They were a little wild, a little unrestrained, and Robert Plant especially. But now, just 4 months later, they're Led Zeppelin. They're Led Zeppelin. They've got the tightness. I mean, they ratchet it up as time goes on, but holy shit, this is Led Zeppelin. And it is great. Man, I hope you hear... Do you hear what I hear? If nothing else, you can enjoy the music, even if you don't, take value from my ramblings, and I wouldn't blame you, because many of you already know this stuff. There's plenty of you who talk to me that are like, oh, I haven't heard this in a while. I haven't listened to this in years, but you gave me a fresh perspective, which is brilliant, which makes me very, very happy. But if you're not into the babble about the where, the wheres, the whens, the whys, the context, that's cool. You can always fast forward to the music. I will not take it personally. I will hunt you down, but I will not take it. Won't be personal. Just business. Just business. All right, we have I Can't Quit You out of the way. Great song from Willie Dixon, as are many of the Led Zeppelin blues numbers, like You Shook Me, and Whole Lotta Love, even. If you haven't heard Willie Dixon's Whole Lotta Love, or not Willie Dixon, I guess it was Muddy Waters. Shit, I can't remember. What the hell? I'm just getting old, I guess. I think Muddy Waters did You Need Love, which is, you need cooling, I'm not fooling, somebody send you back to schooling, way down inside, woman, you need love. You should listen to it. It's really cool. And, you can find them on those YouTubes of like songs Led Zeppelin stole. And they start with the ones that Led Zeppelin really did rip off, because they did it. Basically, it was they had motive, they had means, they had opportunity, so they did it. And they being primarily Jimmy Page and Peter Grant. Savvy businessmen of that era made a ton of money off it. And ethics, schmethics, it's the music business. But I separate the art from the artist, because you have to, or else you'd end up listening to just Amy Grant all day long, Sarah McLachlan. And that's not my bag, baby. It's not my bag. So let us move ahead. I am gonna play for you Killing Floor. This is a good one. It starts off real scary and evil, and it's darker, and I don't know, you're gonna like it. The song. It contains the embryo of the Lemon song. And since it's blues, and since it's Led Zeppelin, it's gonna be awesome. So let's listen to that, shall we? Killing Floor, Led Zeppelin. Again, this is April 26th, 1969 at the Winterland in San Francisco. Here we go. Nice slide solo from Jimmy on the back end of that song. Man, and Jonesy made that song work. If that wasn't for that super, super tight, it's not even, I don't think it's a walking bass line because it's got some pop to it. What would it be? A dancing bass line. Do 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 do. So good, and Bonzo right there, and you can hear it, turning into the Lemon song already, and hear the ideas that are going to make it to the record, because as most of you know, Led Zeppelin 2 was recorded on the road. They would do gigs, and then they would go into a studio in whatever town they were in and lay down some tracks. And I think that primarily was in May of '69, but you can hear them working out. There are licks, riffs, and runs on this version of Killing Floor that are in the Lemon song. So it's fascinating to hear them working that out on stage. And, it isn't a complete product yet because the audience did not lose it at the end. Because it ended a little abruptly. So it's neat to hear them working it out and still, like a butterfly drying its wings. They're together. They're a solid band. They're an amazing band, but they get even better to take that level of performance and that level of charisma and that level of technique and then still hone that, polish it, and refine it until you get something just supernal, something that's lasted 50 years. 51 years ago. That concert was 51 years ago. And, we're still talking about it. Well, I'm talking about it. You're listening about it. So, they must have done something right. I say it almost every podcast, but what a band. Honestly. My God. Well. I really like that wah-wah slide Jimmy did at the end. And that beginning of the song, before it got into which I was never really a fan of, that riff. But before that, it was nasty. It was dark. It was evil. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Alrighty. I am going to play for you, my friends, what is probably the first ever live performance of Whole Lotta Love. It is cool. And in lieu of a theremin solo, the funky theremin part, Jimmy does a funky psychedelic guitar solo. So it is pretty rad. Otherwise, I mean, it's boom. It's a Whole Lotta Love the instant you hear it. And the funny thing is, the people in the audience were like, play something from the album. Not literally, but, they're like, play how many more times? Play Communication Breakdown. Play I Can't Quit You, Baby. Play Baby, I'm Gonna Leave You. Play Dazed and Confused. And they already played most of those songs. Actually, they already played all of those songs. So it's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy that these guys were kids. Robert was still 20 years old, I think. Bonzo had just turned 21. No, not even. Bonzo was still 20 years old. Jimmy Page and not Jimmy Page, Robert Plant and Bonzo were 20 years old. Jonesy was 23. And Jimmy was 25. 25 years old. Just old enough to rent a car. And they're headlining this amazing music that they already dominate. And they're like the Alexander the Great of rock bands. They just conquered the entire world. And then went away. Died too young. Well, isn't that melancholy? I don't want to be melancholy. This isn't a Smashing Pumpkins podcast. Ha, 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 ha. Alrighty, let's get to the first ever, probably, live performance of Whole Lotta Love by your favorite band and mine, Led Zeppelin. Here we go, friends. Enjoy. Wasn't that something? Embryonic, but still a whole lot of love. Working it out on the stage. And the response that song got, first time ever anybody heard it, and the crowd loved it. Great way to end the show. Great way to end the second set. Really good stuff all around. Boy, oh boy, do I love that band. And so do you if you've listened this far. And if you love me and want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at Heart of Markness. Join my Facebook group at Heart of Markness, or just Heart of Markness on Facebook. Bunch of good people there. If you're interested in the Led Zeppelin live recordings in the live community and don't really know where to start, and not the most tech savvy guy or girl, and want to dip your toe in, it's a very friendly, welcoming place. I run a nice community. Actually, I don't even have to run it because everybody there is nice. So consider hanging out there. Demographically, you're more likely to be on Facebook because you're more likely to be somebody in their 50s or 60s or late 40s. And, consider it. It's a good place to hang out. It's a good place to get announcements. I drop the podcast there. I drop other stuff there now and again. And other people drop stuff too. So it is pretty cool. I am also on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel that I'm filling up slowly. I've got about 2/3 of the Led Zeppelin podcasts up. And when that's done, I'll work on the bonus episodes, etc. And if you like what I do and you want to support what I do, you like the live music, you like the classic rock on the weekends, not necessarily Led Zeppelin on the weekends, but something different and still good, consider becoming a patron of the Heart of Markness. And you can do so at patreon.com/Heart of Markness. And I will read the names of the beautiful people, the titans upon whose shoulders rests the Heart of Markness podcast. So a laurel and hearty handshake and a thank you to Chris, Michael, Rob, Wayne, Brad, Danielle, Tracy, David, Peter, Mark, Other David, Bill, and Mimo. Thank you so much, friends. You allow me to do this. The patrons offset the cost of hosting the podcast on SoundCloud, of the cloud hosting on Mega, where I store the live shows that I share with you guys, the web hosting fee and the website fee. All this stuff patrons help with, and it really makes my life better in a fundamental, tangible way, and I am forever grateful to them for allowing me and supporting me and believing in me, and it's just the best. And I've made friends with most of them, and I consider each one of them a friend already. And if you don't want to pay or can't pay, that's totally cool, because this is a free podcast anyway. And the patrons get an extra podcast every month. And other than that, you are welcome to listen for free. As I said, I do this out of love for the band, love for music, and for at the time there really weren't many podcasts of which I knew. There was the Ramble On Radio podcast for Led Zeppelin, which was primarily a news podcast for Led Zeppelin news and Led Zeppelin related news. Very, very necessary, very, very needed, and very, very cool. But at the time there weren't any of which I were aware, live Led Zeppelin podcasts where you could sit down at work, on your way to work, on your way home from work, working in the garage, mowing the lawn or whatever, listen to me ramble, and then hear some really cool music that you probably haven't heard before. And I want, Led Zeppelin is a live band. The studio shit is great, but they are a live band. That's where they shine. That's why they're legendary. That's why they are gods. So I want to highlight that. The virtuosity, the dynamics, everything that Jimmy talks about, the magic, the four minds, the synergy, the more than the sum of their parts, It's all legit. It's all real. And I am joining the ranks of those fine people who herald the name Led Zeppelin. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for loving Led Zeppelin and keeping live music alive. And in these very, very interesting times, I hope you are safe and sane. And I hope you are kind to yourself and to others, because that's the way this all gets better. So thank you very much, friends. All the best to you. And I will, hopefully, planning to, talk to you this weekend with my classic rock podcast featuring whatever the latest Mike Millard master release is. That comes out usually around noon on Saturday. I've been spending time with my family Friday and Saturday, so typically the podcast posts Sunday from now on. Most of the time. So if you don't see it Saturday, which I don't think you will see it Sunday. So thanks everybody. Enjoy, and I'll talk to you soon.